everyone, it's Shel C from PaperOcotilloStudio, and today I'm sharing with you a project that I'm starting to make for a gift for one of my kids at Christmas time. And it's all about making a handmade journal with slide-in pockets that contains holiday traditions and recipes that we use every year. I was thinking about, when I'm gone, will my kids incorporate any of those things into their holiday traditions? And it just seems like if they don't have the recipes and whatever, they won't be able to do it. So I thought it would be a fun thing to do. Over in Art Joy of Sharing on Facebook, our art community with Peg Robinson and I, our hashtag theme this month is AJOS perfect recipe. So this kind of project also just kind of rolls into that. So I have some half page pocket page protectors that you slide pages into that I got at the office store a while back. And I have some metal rings, like metal snap together rings. And I had this thick tag board that is from packaging, and I decided to make my covers out of that. So I cut them a ½ inch bigger than the sleeves. And then I've got 3 holes punched, and I have those metal rings to snap it all together. So I need to decorate my covers. So that's what I started with. I decided to do kind of a mixed media look on the front of the cover. I used my little die cutting machine and some Thinlit dies to cut out some words for the front of it. And then I'm just using scraps of paper from my collections of different colors papers. I decided to go with a green and red theme. We celebrate quite a few different traditions here in our house, but one of them is we do Christmas gifting. And of course, the colors of that are red and green. And so I decided to just use kind of half of the piece being covered with red and half the piece being covered with green. And then I want to make sure that my holes are there for the rings to be put through. So I decided to make some little reinforcement rings, which are really just, in this case, decorative. But I used the same hole punch that I punched the cardboard with, and then a larger circle punch around it, punching the small hole and then centering the larger circle around it to make some little page reinforcers. I will put a complete page slightly smaller on the inside to cover up all those edges. That's just all one piece for the inside of the book. I also have to do the back one the same way to make a front and back cover. And then for my pages, as you will see, I cut them out of watercolor paper, 300-pound watercolor paper, and they are slightly smaller than the sleeves, and they slip in, so I can pull my page out, decorate it on the front and the back, and then put it back in once it's dry. So the next thing I decided to do on my cover is a little bit of mark making with some stencils. These are all stencil from Stencil Girl products. And I started out with some yellow. To me, yellow and gold is also a holiday color. So I'm just using the yellow first and making some different patterns and markings around using sections of some different stencils. It kind of integrates, there is some yellow in these papers, and so it kind of helps the yellow flow through the whole thing. Then I also have some orangey red and some darker blue red that I'm using to add here and there with some more mark making. Just using, again, parts of the stencils. I'm not using a whole stencil anywhere. It's not like I just slap it down and put the whole thing. It's just little bits and pieces. I have some white that I can mix it with. And I have a couple colors of green. And this just kind of integrates all the different pieces so that it doesn't just look like kind of a grid of glued papers, and brings the colors across the whole composition. This is something I would do to start any type of a project, whether it was, a mixed media canvas or a page or something. I like to do collage, and so it makes me happy to start any of my projects with gluing down some paper. I did use Liquitex matte gel medium, both underneath and over the top of all these pieces, so they're very sealed. I also used a credit card scraper to squish them down and make sure there's not any wrinkles or bubbles. And it looks festive, I think, because of the colors, and there are some shapes in there that give you the idea of maybe a tree or ornaments, but in a very abstract way. I'm not trying to make a scene here. I'm just making, something super abstract. I like to draw these lines when I do mark making. I just like them. I don't know why, I just do. So I made a few lines with some India ink, and I also am using a white brush pen from Posca. This is acrylic ink inside of a brush pen. I just got these. It's got, a flexible brush on it, and I can make fat or thin lines, drag it across. It's more painterly than the bullet tip pens because I can vary the line width depending on how much I press down on the brush. I think these are pretty cool. I didn't know that Posca had brush pens until Peg told me that she'd seen them at Jerry's Artorama or something, and I was like, oh, I gotta have that. So I ordered a black one and a white one. And I'm just, circling things, I'm splattering and making some marks just to kind of make this my own with some mark making, my own hand. So once all that's done, I decide to glue on my letters. You can see them on the right hand side there on my silicone mat. And I've been avoiding them with my elbow and my arm. And so I just want to get them glued on there so that I don't lose any of the pieces. I used a Finlitz alphabet die to cut these out of white cardstock. So they're a little bit thicker. And then I'm using my ruler across the page to make sure that I kind of make them a little bit straight. They're fun and funky letters. They're not super, I don't feel like they have to be perfectly straight, but I do want them somewhat straight. And then I'm using just a ball tip tool and I put a little bit of the matte medium on it, just a tiny bit, and then I can pick them up. I put some matte medium down with the brush on the piece, and then I'm just taking that ball tool, picking up the letters, placing them into the wet matte medium, and then once the whole word is done, I go over the top and make sure it's all pressed down with my Distress Collage brush with some more matte medium so it's all sealed in. Then I set that aside to dry. I do want to do some shadowing and different things on those letters, but I need it to be dry first. So I start working on my first page. Remember I said this is watercolor paper. I decided to do some watercolor with it. So I have this set of watercolors. They're called shadow colors, and they're mixed with sumi, Japanese sumi ink. So they're darker because you've got your watercolor and then you've got this dark ink in it as well. So I drew just a couple lines of hills across my white paper, and then I'm using the shadow blue and the shadow purple colors out of the set. And I will put a link to these below, as well as a link to the brush pens and the other watercolor set I used. These are new things. You guys can always go to my Amazon page that's linked below and find most of the things that I use, but when I get something new, I'll go ahead and put some links directly to these things because it'll be easier for you to find them. Now this one is the Kuretake Starry Colors. I just got this one, and it's got varying colors of gold and silver, and it's very sparkly watercolor paint. And I'm using them to add shine to make the snowy areas of my hills more shiny and sparkly, and then also to splatter some stars into the sky. So those are both fairly new to me, little watercolor sets. I'm getting kind of obsessed with sets of watercolor. I need to stop. I don't even do watercolor. I mean, I use it in the mixed media format, but I don't like do watercolors, you know, where it's just watercolor. Why do I keep buying all these watercolors? I guess it's in preparation for someday being a watercolor artist. It's kind of funny. So I recently organized all of my dies, and I just had all these dies, and they were so hard to use because I could never find what I was looking for. So I bought some magnetic vent cover because the magnetic pieces, you can buy magnetic pieces to store your dies, right? Because that will adhere to the metal on the die and keep it in place. But to buy those sheets is just way too expensive. And so Peg said to me that you could buy these vent covers at the home store. And I picked up a couple packs of them. They're 16 inches long and like maybe 10 inches wide, the ones that I got. And they were $6.99 for 3 of them. And I cut them down to smaller sizes. And then I sorted all my dies onto them into their little sets. Like this one goes with the stamp set, as you can see. I've never used the stamp set, and I wanted to use it, and I wanted to use the dies that go with it. And so I've got all the dies that came with it. They're on this thin magnetic piece, and then when I'm done with it, I just slide it back into a pocket. And so I have 2 half-size 3-ring binders with all my dies all sorted and put onto magnets now. And so much easier to use. I'm sure I'll be using them much more often. I don't know why I have all these dies. I never use them. So I used the stamp set that goes with the dies. I cut out one of the trees out of some painty paper, and then I just used a Versamark VersaFine Claire. There we go. VersaFine Claire, not a Versamark. Dark green ink pad to stamp the trees, and then to also stamp over my little die. I glued that one down, and now I'm using some letters to stamp Night Before Christmas Hot Cocoa. So one of the traditions in our family ever since the kids were really little, we all sit around and read books the night before Christmas, sing songs, and then drink hot cocoa. And it has to be homemade, that's made on the stove, hot cocoa. So this is one of the recipes that I have that I've been making for years and years and years on Christmas Eve. And so that's my first page. I'll be putting some of the recipes from my Thanksgiving traditions, some recipes from my grandmother that I make every year, pie and buns and things like that, that we just have them every time. And if my kids eventually want to recreate that idea, they'll have the book in which to do it with. Plus, it's done creatively and artistically. So that's my big plan. I hope I get it done. But I wrote the recipe and the directions. I decided to put a little cup. So I cut out a cup shape and a handle from the red. And then from a piece of white, I cut some whipped cream. And then from the red again, I cut a little stick for a peppermint stick. I always put a peppermint stick in the cocoa, and also a little bit of peppermint extract. So it's what we have every year. So I cut the red, and then I took a white Posca pin and made the stripes so that you can see it's a peppermint stick. I glued all that down to the page using some Yoo-Hoo glue stick. And so now you see there's a little cup of cocoa with whipped cream and a peppermint stick, and that's what we have. We read the the one book every year we read, the train. What's it called? You know, the train goes to the North Pole, and they always have hot cocoa with peppermint. And so that's kind of, I started reading that to the kids when they were very little. So that's kind of why we started that tradition of having the homemade cocoa. Usually cocoa just comes from packets. I don't make it on the stove, but in this case, special occasions, make it on the stove. So then I used some Pitt Artist Pen markers to just do a little bit of detail work on my page. And what else did I do? I think I went around the outside edge with my ink pad, with my dark blue ink pad to just frame the page. Put a little tree on the front of the cup so that you can tell it's a Christmas mug. We have Christmas mugs that are in the china cabinet that never come out except for at Christmas. And then I made the one tree that I cut out with the die cut, I made into a decorated tree. We like to put lights up outside for Christmas. Of course, we don't have a pine tree. We put the lights right on the cactuses, but you get the idea. Some people actually have a pine tree to put stuff in their yard. So this is like a snowy nighttime scene outside, and then the recipe for the warm hot cocoa with the peppermint inside, and sitting and reading books, maybe singing some songs, and that's what we do on the night before Christmas. So then to finish off the front cover, I used a black fine tip Posca pen to make some shadows on my letters so that they stand out from the background a little bit better. And then I also used a red and a green Posca pen to make dots, like the letters have lights, like they're lighting up. And that was it. That's what I did today to start out my holiday traditions recipe journal. Hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, remember to give it a thumbs up. You can leave me a comment. Tell me if you want to make something like this, and maybe I inspired you to do something like this for your family. I know a lot of the people that follow my channel are similar in age and life situation to me, so you might think that this would be something you might want to make for one of your kids or grandkids or something. I don't have any grandkids, so I'm making it for my adult child, the one that doesn't live anywhere near us. You can, of course, share this with someone. You can subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Please do. And yeah, I will put the links below the video for the new products. That's it for me. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.